I locked my apartment door, my eyes wandered down the hall, only to spot Mrs. Henderson standing in her doorway. Her reflection mimicked my movements, and we were caught in an odd, quiet dance. The dimming sunlight filtered through the dusty window, casting a sickly yellow glow on Mrs. Henderson's face. Her face, now deeply lined with worry, overshadowed her usual warm smile, which I had never noticed before. Her eyes, usually crinkled with laughter, looked swollen and rimmed in red, resembling overstuffed suitcases hanging beneath her heavy gaze. For 4 years, Mrs. Henderson had been a consistent presence in our worn-down building, as dependable as the morning sun. Every morning, she would burst out of her door like a ray of sunshine, dressed in a kaleidoscope of floral prints, full of vibrant energy, and her voice was a happy chirp that could outdo any robin. But today, the woman who stood before me seemed like a mere shadow of the lively soul I had come to know. Her clothing, once a vivid tapestry of sunflowers and roses on turquoise canvas, now draped listlessly upon her emaciated figure. Her footsteps, which had once echoed with a rhythmic clack on the polished tiles, now shuffled with a wariness that sent a chill down my spine. A sense of unease began to gnaw at my stomach, and the familiarity of her presence was replaced by an unsettling discomfort. As I was making my way down the stairs towards my car, her voice suddenly grabbed my attention. There was a distinct tremor in her voice that had gone unnoticed before.
"Excuse me?"
She said, her voice sounding like a strained whisper that was struggling to escape from her dry throat. Irritated at my failed attempt to escape, I couldn't hide the impatience that colored my tone. "Yes?" I responded, forcing a smile that felt as artificial as it undoubtedly looked. Her voice hushed to a whisper, a hint of strangeness seeping into her words.
"This may sound strange, but have you heard any unusual sounds lately?"
My mind raced, sifting through memories in search of any inexplicable noises, yet only the customary symphony of city life came to mind, the blaring car horns, the far-off wails of sirens, and the rhythmic moan of the aging building as it settled. "What kind of sounds?" I asked, my caution evident in the slow precision of my words.
"The clicking."
She answered, her voice dropping further, a tremor shaking her words. I shook my head from left to right. "No, ma'am, I haven't," I said, the words sounding empty even to my ears. As she shuffled down the hallway, a sigh escaped her lips, seeming to drain the last vestiges of her energy. The once vibrant floral print dress now hung limply, brushing softly against her legs, a stark contrast to her previous quick and purposeful stride. As she passed me, the familiar scent of lavender and mothballs trailed behind her, clinging to her like a memory long abandoned. I found myself rooted in place, the strangeness of the encounter weighing heavily upon my shoulders. It was a weird way to begin the day, a thought that bounced aimlessly off the cold silence of the hallway. I paused for a moment, allowing the rhythmic click of her heels to dissolve into the distance before I began my descent down the stairs. Outside, the cars inched along the congested streets, their sluggish pace a reflection of my muddied thoughts. Mrs. Henderson's questions about the clicking reverberated within my mind, a jarring disruption amongst the familiar cacophony of blaring horns and rumbling engines. Could the insistent dripping, imitating a clicking sound, be coming from a broken pipe? Or maybe a rodent, its minuscule claws tapping against the building's hidden recesses? The demands of work provided a much-needed respite from the unsettling question that plagued me. Emails flooded my inbox, deadlines demanded my attention, and the everyday minutiae swiftly relegated Mrs. Henderson's concerns to the recesses of my thoughts. Time slipped by in a haze of meetings, reports, and hastily consumed lunches. The question about the clicking, once an ominous mystery, became a distant memory, relegated to the forgotten corners of my mind, where it gathered dust alongside other peculiarities of my life. As days stretched into weeks, the rhythmic tap of keyboards and the whir of office machinery eclipsed the haunting echoes of the clicking. Yet, as much as I tried to immerse myself in the daily grind, there were moments when the memory of Mrs. Henderson's worry would resurface, a nagging reminder of the unanswered question that lingered in the shadows. The late shift invariably cloaked me in an otherworldly sensation, akin to a nocturnal creature emerging into the blinding light of day. Fatigue enveloped me like a suffocating shroud as I hauled my weary body up the all-too-familiar stairs. Midway through my ascent, a flicker of movement across the hall seized my attention. Framed within Mrs. Henderson's doorway stood a young couple, their presence a jarring contrast to the familiar sight of her floral prints. The doorway stood open, exposing a team of burly men grappling with large pieces of furniture in the now vacant apartment. With leaden legs, I finally reached my doorway, heaving a heavy sigh as I fumbled for my keys. Casting a final glance across the hall, my breath caught in my throat. Mrs. Henderson's apartment now stood stripped bare, its once cozy confines completely empty. The mismatched floral furniture and the overflowing bookcases that had painted a vivid picture of her well-lived life were gone. In their place, a crew of movers wrestled with sleek, modern pieces, their sterile plastic wrapping gleaming under the unforgiving glare of the overhead light. The stark absence hit me with a force that sliced through my exhaustion. No farewell note, no boxes stacked in the hallway, not even the customary hum of activity that preceded a move. It felt as if Mrs. Henderson had been erased, as if her existence had been wiped clean off the face of the earth. In the intricate web of an apartment building, the cacophony of sounds, the groan of overburdened trolleys, the dull thuds of boxes descending the stairs, typically announced when someone was moving out. Yet, in the case of Mrs. Henderson, there had been no such sounds. She simply vanished, as insubstantial as a wisp of smoke, leaving behind a disquieting silence and a nagging sense of unease. As I entered my apartment, I took off my uniform, peeling away the day's exhaustion with a layer of worn skin. An impenetrable fog of fatigue loomed over me, calling me towards the oblivion of sleep. Yet, the thought of Mrs. Henderson's sudden decision to move out of the apartment hovered at the periphery of my consciousness, a nagging reminder of the unanswered question about the clicking. Despite the intrigue, the irresistible lure of slumber proved too strong to resist, and I succumbed to its pull. Waking up, the hands of the clock ticked onward, heralding towards 8 p.m. with an insistent growl from my stomach. A groan, mimicking the wary protest of the building's aging pipes, escaped my lips as I forced myself into the kitchen. The comforting scent of coffee filled the air as I grappled with the kettle, a modest dinner serving as the sole barrier between me and utter exhaustion. Settling onto the worn couch, I flicked on the TV. The flickering image is a poor substitute for human connection. I reached for the remote, adjusting the volume with a twinge of self-consciousness, aware of the unfamiliar occupants across the hall. Just as a semblance of normalcy settled over the evening, an unexpected sound pierced the quiet, shattering the illusion of peace. It was a clicking sound, rhythmic and insistent, emanating from somewhere. The soft light of the television bathed the room in an orange hue, providing little solace in the face of the unsettling silence that had supplanted the earlier clicking. I pressed the mute button on the remote, focusing my hearing to recapture the sound. Had it been my imagination? As abruptly as it had begun, the clicking stopped. My thoughts churned, grasping for a logical explanation. Maybe, as I had hypothesized with Mrs. Henderson, it was merely a rogue pite or an industrious rodent. The silence, however, lingered, a tangible presence that refused to dissipate. It was as if the clicking had been a harbinger of an unresolved mystery, a thread of unease that remained woven into the very fabric of the apartment building. With a groan, I heaved myself off the couch and trudged back to the kitchen. Weariness weighed upon me like a physical entity, a heavy mantle shrouding my shoulders. Turning on the faucet, I began scrubbing the dishes, the rhythmic switching of an inadequate effort to quell the unease resonating within me. A sigh, laden with weariness, punctured into the air as I finished the dishes and meandered back to my bedroom. Sleep, once a sanctuary I craved, now loomed like an onerous task, devoid of its usual rejuvenating allure. The mundanity of the task, combined with the inexplicable clicking that had pervaded the apartment, coalesced into a palpable sense of disillusionment. The world seemed to have shifted ever so slightly on its axis, leaving me adrift in a sea of unease and restlessness. I burrowed my face into my pillow, desperate for the escape of sleep. It didn't come easy, but eventually my heavy eyelids gave in. However, sleep was restless that night. Something yanked me awake into the pitch black room. Blinking at the harsh green glow of my bedside clock, it read 2:55 a.m. I listened, but all I could hear was a suffocating silence. Then, it started. That soft clicking noise. It seemed to be coming from outside of my bedroom window, making my skin crawl. The sound was like nothing I'd heard before. A weird tapping that echoed through the night. My heart raced, and a sense of dread settled into my gut. This clicking didn't make sense for a rodent, especially one outside. It had a rhythm, like some kind of code, cutting through the unusual city sounds. Was it just the wind rustling the tree branches? Despite the fear I had to know, I dragged myself out of bed, my body heavy. I reached the window and slowly pulled back the curtain, revealing a slice of moonlight that sliced through the dark room. The street below was empty and quiet, offering no clues. Across the way, the woods loomed like a dark void against the horizon. For a moment, all I could hear was the usual city sounds. Then, the clicking started again, sharp and insistent. This time, I saw where it was coming from, but I was surprised I hadn't noticed it earlier. There was a figure at the edge of the woods, barely visible in the shadows. It looked like a man, but something about it was off. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat matching the restless clicking. Fear caught in my throat, making it hard to breathe. In the dim moonlight, the figure didn't move, but it radiated a sense of danger. Click, 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 click. 4 quick clicks pierced the silence, coming from the figure across the street with a bizarre, rhythmic beat. My hands scrambled on the nightstand for my glasses. Without them, the figure was just a blurry shape, a mix of shadow and moonlight. Finally, I found them and shoved them into my face. Everything came into focus, but it didn't make me feel any better. The figure was still as a statue now. The clicking was replaced by an eerie silence. It was bald, its head a smooth, glistening dome devoid of hair or even eyebrows. Its skin stretched taut over its skeletal frame with an unnatural grayish hue, like aged putty left to bake under a merciless sun. Suddenly, the clicking started again, making me gasp. But this time, it was even worse. 3 slits appeared on the figure's neck, like a zipper being opened. They opened and closed with each click. The clicks were accompanied by a disgusting, gurgling noise that sounded like seagulls choking, but the sound was distorted and metallic. The slits on its neck pulsed in a disgusting rhythm. I couldn't move, caught between the need to watch and the fear that froze me in place. I observed as this figure persisted in its symphony of clicks and gasps, its gills on the neck opening and closing in a grotesque rhythm. Abruptly, the steady clicking stopped, and a rush of adrenaline coursed through me. In the distance, the headlights of a city bus sliced through the darkness, briefly illuminating the street across the way. Against the backdrop of the woods, the figure stood exposed in the stark glare of the headlights, its gills pulsating in the transient light. But as quickly as it had arrived, the bus rumbled past, casting the scene back into shadow. My breath caught in my throat. The figure had vanished, leaving no trace, as if consumed by the same darkness from which it had come from. I stood frozen, a statue chiseled from raw terror. My mind raced, grasping for logical explanations. Could it have been some sort of prank? A hallucination born from lack of sleep? Yet, the clicking, the grotesque figure, it all felt undeniably real, resonating with the horrifying truth that echoed Mrs. Henderson's question and her sudden leave from the apartment. Terror weighed upon my chest, suffocating and oppressive. With trembling hands, I drew the curtain shut, the thin fabric a feeble shield against the unseen threat outside. I crawled under the covers, seeking a sanctuary that proved elusive. Sleep evaded me, replaced by a paralyzing dread that stretched through the solitary hours of the night. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind outside my window sent chills down my spine. I was left to contend with the lingering remnants of fear as the night stretched on, endless and unrelenting. The clicking, an ominous harbinger of an inexplicable presence, haunted my thoughts, weaving itself into the fabric of my reality. The mysterious figure, its existence as elusive as the darkness had vanished into, lingered in my mind, a disquieting specter that refused to be banished. As the first faint traces of dawn crept through the cracks in the curtains, the feeble light of the sun offered little solace. It signaled the impending daybreak. With a deep breath, I pushed the constricting covers, the fluorescent glow of my room jarring to my exhausted eyes. Despite my hunger, I had no interest in staying in the apartment. The overpowering urge to escape became the top priority, and the thought of the approaching workday seemed like a welcome invitation. As I dragged myself out the door, each movement was an acknowledgement of the disturbed night I had endured. I was stepping out into a new day, yet the uninvited specter of the uncanny figure persisted, an enigma refusing to be dispelled by the light of day. A lingering fear mingled with a strange, unresolved curiosity as I braced myself for the day ahead. The day at work was a relentless struggle against exhaustion, my eyelids drooping like battle-worn soldiers, persistently begging for respite. Each time I attempted to focus on the intricate report before me, a flicker at the edge of my vision would pull me back into the chilling recollection of the previous night. The figure materialized in my mind, its ashen skin and hairless head an eerie echo of the nightmare. The incessant clicking filled my ears, a horrifying accompaniment to the grotesque dance of the 3 pulsating pores on its neck. Terror seized me, anchoring me to my seat. A scream rose in my throat, yet, before it could escape, another voice punctured the fog of fear. My boss's, sharp with concern. I blinked rapidly, striving to banish the hallucination. There was no monster, only my boss, his hand resting on my shoulder, his face etched with worry.
Are you alright?
Yes, his voice softened with concern. My voice emerged hoarse and unsteady.
Sorry, you startled me.
His gaze roamed over my disheveled appearance.
You look like you haven't slept a wink. Why don't you take the day off?
Relief cascaded over me, and I managed a mumbled word of gratitude as I practically crawled from my chair and stumbled toward my car. As I arrived at my apartment complex, the memory of the creature resurfaced, vivid and horrifying. A bitter sense of dread settled within me. It had not been a hallucination, but a terrifying reality that I had witnessed. I stumbled up the stairs, each step matching my panicked thoughts. Am I going crazy? The question repeated in my head, drowning out any peace. I turned on the TV to distract myself, but the sitcom didn't help much against the worry eating at me. I put a frozen dinner in the microwave and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the TV until exhaustion took over. A sudden noise woke me up. The TV turned to static. Disoriented, I noticed a sharp clicking noise cutting through the static. I recognized the noise. It was much louder this time, louder than it's ever been. The clicking seemed to be approaching from below, making its way up the stairs. Fear filled me. I ran to the front of the door of my apartment, desperate to escape. But then I remembered the stairs were the only way down, and that's where the clicking was coming from. I was trapped, and the clicking was getting louder, closer to my door. Fear and confusion took over as I realized that the terror I'd seen in the woods was now on my doorstep. Panic clenched my gut. With no escape, I dashed to my bedroom. I slammed the door and fumbled with the lock. My heart pounded as I scrambled to call 911. Before I could dial, the sound stopped me. Several soft clicks followed by the creak of my front door opening. I gasped. I froze, holding my breath. The thing didn't need my fear to find me. The clicking grew louder, closer, coming from right outside my bedroom door. A strangled gasp escaped my lips. I held my breath. A statue carved from pure terror. The clicking grew louder and closer, emanating from right outside my bedroom door. With a sickening crunch, the doorknob turned. My blood ran cold. This thing somehow unlocked my door from the outside. Locks were no obstacle, their purpose useless. I watched in paralyzed horror as the door creaked open, revealing the full, grotesque form of the creature. It was a skeletal horror, its emaciated frame barely covered by a thin veneer of grayish skin stretched taut over its bones. Any semblance of humanity was absent, replaced by a collection of grotesque features. Where a nose should have been, there was only a smooth, concave indentation. Eyebrows and hair were entirely absent, the skull a smooth dome. Its eyes were sunken pits of darkness. They seemed to pierce through me, a bottomless abyss that devoured my sanity whole. The creature tilted its head, the rhythmic clicking emanating from a trio of pulsating, fleshy sacs on its neck. A putrid stench, like decaying flesh and stagnant water, assaulted my nostrils. It was then, face to face with this thing, that I realized the true weight of my situation. I shrank back in revulsion, my breath rasping in my throat. The creature remained unnervingly still in the doorway. Its dark eyes locked on me with an intensity that stole my breath. The clicking became a maddening metronome, each pulse hammering a beat of pure terror against my sanity. Its mere presence reeked of an unimaginable evil, an entity that defied all logic and scientific explanation. As my eyes desperately adjusted to the dim light, the grotesque details of its skeletal form sharpened into horrifying focus. Shallow cheeks sucked inward, highlighting the sharp angles of its skull. Its jaw protruded like a grotesque underbite, and its elongated fingers tipped with wickedly curved blackened nails seemed poised to tear me limb from limb. The grayish skin, devoid of any reflection, seemed to absorb the light itself, creating an unsettling aura of darkness around it. Then, in a heartbeat, the thing surged forward in a blur of sickening speed, its movement defying the natural constraints of physics. It didn't run, walk, or jump. It simply flowed, its elongated limbs thrashing like a monstrous spider as it propelled itself towards me. Its grotesque embrace hung in the air, a promise of agonizing torture. The clicking sound reached a deafening crescendo, a pneumatic assault that reverberated through my skull like a jackhammer on high. My vision blurred, the frantic dance of shadows morphing into a maddening kaleidoscope. My brain, overwhelmed by the relentless assault, screamed for my reprieve. The creature's mouth stretched open at a grotesquely wide angle, and instead of teeth, rows upon rows of fleshy, gill-like protrusions lined its mouth, vibrating in synchronization with the clicking. Saliva, thick and viscous, dripped from the thing's mouth, glistening obscenely in the dim light as it loomed even closer. Click, 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 click. I squeezed my eyes shut, cupping my hands over my ears in a futile attempt to silence the relentless assault. But the clicks persisted, a relentless drumbeat echoing in the cavernous emptiness of my mind, their volume seemingly amplified by the desperate pressure of my palms. Disoriented and weak, I opened my eyes to find my vision blurred beyond recognition. My body, a leaden weight, refused to obey my frantic commands. My knees buckled, betraying me with a sickening snap. I crumpled to the floor, the hardwood greeting my face with a bone-jarring impact. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, the last image that seared itself into my brain was the grotesque visage of the creature. Those pulsating, otherworldly gills and the horrifying, deafening clicks. Darkness, thick and suffocating, descended, swallowing me whole. I floated in a void that seemed to last forever, yet felt like it happened in an instant. My consciousness, a flickering ember threatened by a relentless wind, teetered on the precipice of oblivion. The cacophony of clicks lingered faintly in the recesses of my mind, a nightmarish echo from a world teetering on the brink of madness. When I finally clawed my way back from unconsciousness, my sensations returned in a sluggish wave. A dull throb resonated through my skull, a relentless drumbeat against the backdrop of crushing silence. The taste of metallic blood mingled with the dust on my tongue, a testament to my brutal impact with the floor. My eyelids fluttered open, vision blurred as I tried to focus on the room around me. It was empty. The creature was nowhere in sight. The unnatural quiet was broken only by the ragged rasp of my breathing, a stark counterpoint to the symphony of terror that had just unfolded. As I frantically scanned the room, relief warred the confusion in a chaotic dance. The creature was gone, vanished without a trace. The only evidence of its horrifying visit was my still open bedroom door. Glancing at the nightstand clock, I saw the digital display mockingly blink 7:35 a.m. My body ached with a dull throb, and a hot tear escaped, tracing a salty path down my cheek. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet. Unsteady steps carried me out of the bedroom and into the living room, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to me like cobwebs. Emerging into the hallway, I nearly collided with my new neighbors, a young couple who had just moved in across the hall. They were exiting their apartment, both impeccably dressed and radiating the glow of morning people.
"Whoa, buddy,"
the boyfriend said, his voice laced with concern. You look like you haven't slept in a week. Everything all right? I opened my mouth to speak, but a wave of weakness washed over me, stealing my voice. Finally, I managed a raspy stammer. Have you guys heard any strange noises around here lately? The girlfriend, impeccably manicured nails tapping a rhythm against her purse, raised an eyebrow. Strange noises? Like what? She inquired, a hint of amusement dancing in her eyes. Taking a deep breath, I forced the words out, my voice barely above a whisper. The clicking.